Welcome to my presentation about air pollution and houseplants. I grew up in the city of Beijing, a place that's known for its constant air pollution. And while many of us think of air pollution as only an environmental issue, it actually also has really negative impacts on human health. According to the World Health Organization, as many as 7 million people die every year due to air pollution, and 9 out of 10 people live in areas with high levels of pollution. So I wanted to use my project as a way to look into this issue and see what I can do to help resolve it. So the smog that I saw in Beijing as a kid was outdoor air pollution. Outdoor air pollution is made up of components you see here on the right. But indoor air pollution is also a huge problem. In the developed world, indoor air pollution can come from furniture, carpeting, or paint, or a lot of different things in your house. And these release volatile organic compounds, VOCs, as well as formaldehyde, which can cause dizziness or headaches or nausea or anything like that. And if you have a gas heater in your home that's not vented properly, it could release carbon monoxide, which prevents oxygen flow to your brain if it's breathed in too much. Big problem. And the issue becomes even more prominent in developing countries because 2 to 3 billion people around the world cook using coal, wood, other biomass, and it's also used for heat. So it's used a lot within the home. And whenever all of these are burned without the proper mix of fuel and air to allow for complete combustion, it produces a lot of particles that's really bad for the human body. And it causes things like asthma, lung cancer, or a lot of different chronic diseases. According to the World Health Organization, as many as 4 million people die deaths related to indoor air pollution, and most of these deaths do occur in developing countries. When I lived in Beijing, we were lucky enough to always have an air purifier running in the background, but as you can see, they're pretty pricey and a lot of people in developing countries don't have access to them. So I developed this project. My hope is to conduct some experiments using plants as a way of filtration, and if it works, to bring plant filtration as a possible idea into the home. I got the idea for my experimental setup from a NASA study done in 1989. So I'm gonna go through my supplies first. I got 2 air quality monitors. They all measured particulate matter, VOCs, formaldehyde, as well as CO2. And I got these 2 different ones so that I can compare results in the end. They weren't incredibly precise, but obviously I couldn't buy the $3,000 equipment that NASA used. So I adapted these for my purposes. Here are the 4 plants that I got for my experiment. I had to do so much plant research throughout the whole thing that people started calling me Plant Lady, and it's the nickname that's kind of stuck. Anyway, I only used the pothos for my experiments because it was the only one I brought home with me over spring break, and I can't exactly go grab the rest from the greenhouse right now at school. So I made do with my pothos. Any good experiment needs to have a control. So I spent entire class period making this beautiful plant. It was super simple, just some construction paper leaves stuck onto sticks that I put into a pot of soil. And it's mostly just to see that the soil isn't what's cleaning the air and it's the plant that is. Okay, so here is my experimental setup. I would put my plant or the control plant into my box with the air quality monitors, inject a pollutant into the box, and see how the air quality changes over time. My final project was pretty much how I planned, although putting it all together was a little more complicated than I thought it was going to be. I had to drill a hole on the side of the box and attach my valve. Thank you to Mr. Higgs and the Mercersburg plumber for telling me what those valves are called, because I had no idea in the beginning. I also had to clamp the corners of the box to make sure it was airtight, because without the clamp, it wasn't very airtight. As you can see, this whole project involved a lot of DIYing, so if you're looking for a weekend project to do while you're in quarantine, then this might be for you. I had to make a couple of decisions throughout my experiment. One was to use incense as my source of pollution. I actually tried using a clove cigar at first, but that made me smell like smoke for a week afterwards, so that idea went immediately out the window. And then I found incense, which smells a lot better and also works just as well. I also decided to draw up 100 milliliters of smoke, which makes up 0.15% of the box in volume. I thought this was a good volume to not overwhelm the plant, but also get good enough readings on my air quality monitors. So here is just an overview of my experimental method. I placed the plant into the box with the air quality monitors, clamped the corners of the box, lit my incense, waited for the smoke to come out, and then I drew up 100 milliliters of smoke with my syringe, and then finally I quickly transferred all of the smoke into the box through the valve. At this point, I recorded the initial value of all the pollutants in the box. I decided to collect data every 5 minutes, once at the initial value, and then 5 minutes later, and then 5 minutes later. This is just a time-lapse video showing how the numbers changed over time. On the left is the control plant, and on the right is a real plant. For analysis, I decided to focus primarily on PM2.5 and PM10 levels, which is particulate matter less than 2.5 microns in diameter and less than 10 microns in diameter, because both of the monitors recorded them. As I mentioned, I had a few mistakes that I had to recover from, like using a box that wasn't super airtight at first or using the clove cigar. I also had to learn some new things, like drilling into plastic, taking care of plants, and using a GoPro. I actually almost killed one of my peace lilies in the beginning of the experiment because I forgot to water it, and I almost lost my nickname as a plant lady, but I eventually brought it back to life by watering it a lot and just watching it. But it was definitely a whole learning process throughout the whole thing. I collected data for both the control group, the fake plant, and the real plant. Once I had collected all of the data, I decided to run a t-test. So a t-test is used to determine if there's a significant difference between the means of two groups. In my case, it's the percent change over 5-minute intervals for the control plant and the experimental plant. Basically, if the value is below 0.05, then we would know that the difference between the two groups is statistically significant and not due to chance. This means that the plants can really clean the air. Those values are highlighted in yellow right here. For monitor 1, the change in PM2.5 from 0 to 5 minutes was significant. And for monitor 2, the percent change of both PM2.5 and PM10 from 5 to 10 minutes was significant. In theory, to prove that the plants are effective, each t-test value should be significant. However, with the limited supplies that we had with limited precision, I would say that this is pretty good. Here's just a more visual representation of how the pollutants changed over time. As you can see, for both monitors and both pollutants, the control plant numbers always rose a lot more and dropped less than the experimental values. From that, we can conclude that the plant definitely does have some positive effect on the air quality. I had a couple of realizations throughout my experiment that I'll share with you. One is that if I water the plant before experimentation, it actually fogs up the box and increases the temperature and humidity a lot, and that usually messes with my data. And I also learned that the first trial of a plant usually works best, and after that, the plant becomes less effective. I'm thinking that might be because the smoke sort of clogs up the plant a little and doesn't make it work as well. So, what does this mean for you? I would say that this experiment provided enough data to show that plants do clean the air to some degree, at least in the controlled experimental setting. So I would say to give the plants a shot for your home. Just buy a couple and leave it around your house. And even if they can't filter every pollutant that's around, they can definitely improve the air quality at least a little bit. Besides, adding a little green to your house is always good, especially since we're stuck indoors so much right now. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. The whole thing was definitely a learning process, not only about the scientific knowledge that I needed about the particles and their effects on human health, but also about experimental design and how to solve problems as I encountered them. Special thanks to my little sister for being my assistant while I experimented at home. And if you guys are interested in buying some plants to put in your house now, here are some good websites to check out. I got all of my plants from Home Depot, but all of these websites are great places. Thank you so much.